I was getting 20% of LeBron's business since I was 24 years old. It wasn't the money thing. It was more so about creating a disruption in the industry to be able to change the way our young men were being represented.
Welcome to the stage, Mr. Rich Paul.
Thank you.
And now I hate to call you Mr. Rich Paul because I feel like
just call me Rich.
That's big Rich.
Yeah, just call me Rich. It's cool.
Rich, we're so excited to have you. Thank you for doing this. I have to give a special shout out to my good friend Jamil for putting us in contact. I very much had to manifest this moment. I read this book and said, I got to find this guy. And the only person that I knew could find you was Jamil. So thank you.
Yeah, Jamil told me that. No, thank you guys. I'm sure it's a lot of people in the chat, but yeah, Jamil's a good friend of mine, but known him a long, long time. And when he reached out to me, Jamil's the nicest guy in the world. So he's like, hey man, I need a favor. And I'm like, okay, his favors is never like a real favor. It's just like a slight ask of something. And so he was like, a friend of mine has this book club and, she does it and it's great, blah, blah, blah. And they're reading your book and great. I was like, man, well, let her know if she wants me to do anything else, I would do it, no problem. So he was like, well, actually, she asked, would you do a Zoom? And I was like, of course. And so anytime I get the chance to speak to peers, colleagues, young men and women, regardless of race or gender, whatnot, I think it's important because I think just that opportunity to share experiences, I think it helps people in the now and in the later, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, I'm excited to be here and get going.
All right, let's get into it because we have questions for you. I want to open up with this. All you could see in Cleveland was more Cleveland. To envision a better life, your imagination had to be extraordinary, but I could feel dreams stirring inside of me. I was definitely searching for something. Those are your words. And so my first question to you is, while you discussed a lot of the deficiencies of Cleveland, how did those circumstances actually contribute to the development of the remarkable imagination that you do have and that you had in that time?
I think it just allows you to continue to dream, right? Because I think when things become accessible to you so early and so fast, you start to take them for granted, right? I couldn't just go down the Fifth Avenue. I had to read the Raw Report, things that people rapped about or things that you saw on TV, in movies and film. I didn't see that when I stepped outside my door. All I saw was Cleveland. And so the reason why I put that in the book is because for most people, they settle there, right? They can't see what's behind that wall. And it's the same way in life. In life, there's a wall in front of you, but it's up to you to have a vision and break through that. Having a vision is way more important than having money. People don't understand that. The game changers in our world, it all came from having a vision. That vision allowed them to create. That creation developed foundation and gave them an asset that then they were able to build out. And that build out allowed them to compound and all those things. And so, but it starts with the vision. And the vision is so important. And that's one thing I had when I was young, going through everything I was going through. I still had this ability to kind of think big and to visualize not where I was at, but really where I wanted to be. And so that was just a natural thing that I was born with. I wanted to give an understanding to the reader when I walked out my door, what it looked like for me. And I'll make this analogy for people. The likes on Instagram allows you to feel like you've already attained something. If you're practicing dental school and you wear your scrubs and you talk about dental, whatever, those likes make you feel like, oh, I'm already a dentist without ever becoming that, without ever becoming a doctor, etc. What does that do? It stunts your growth. When you don't have that accessibility, you continue to strive on to get through that finish line. Not get to the finish line. It's a difference between getting to the finish line and getting through the finish line. That's why when you finish a race, they teach you to burst through. They teach you that. And so that was me. That was the understanding that I had. And I was able to differentiate things like that. It also caused me to get in the car and want to drive to those places. My whole journey started because I drove to New York and did something. That had a trickle-down effect.
I'm a track athlete, a former one, so that analogy means everything to me because I know you have to keep going even after you finish.
Yeah, because you don't know if you necessarily won the race or not. It's important. It could come down to a photo finish and you pulling up allow somebody else to win. It's a game of inches. And it's the same thing in life. Most people pull up prior to really positioning themselves. And so even in today and where I'm at and all I've been able to do, I haven't pulled up yet. I'm actually still running.
Well, you told us a lot about your family too, and I think we all fell in love with your family. And I wanted to ask you, you had two different parenting styles coming up from Peaches to Big Rich. How did those contrasting parenting styles of your mom and dad benefit you? And considering the different ways that they did or didn't or weren't able to show up for you?
My family structure was no different than probably a lot of people on this chat, right? Especially those from my generation. That's just how it was. The difference is, when I say no different in terms of like mom and dad dynamic, the difference is mine was flipped, right? I had my dad present and my mom wasn't. And so, in addition to that, my dad was already married. So he didn't live in the household that I was in. So my sister, Brandy, was raising us, and she was young. I was young. She was 9. I was 4. Well, I'm actually, she's 5 years older than me. And my brothers in between. It was a difficult situation in the beginning, very much so, especially when I was really young. But you don't know it, right? Just thinking back when we were writing the book, I started to think about these things and like, damn, how did we get through it? And I remember vividly these things. And so my dad was more of a very matter of fact. He was teaching us survival skills without us knowing that, right? He was teaching us the importance of having a work ethic, the importance of having accountability. He used to have this term where he said he's going to pull the plug. And if he pulled the plug, that means all the electricity was out. No coat, no boots, no this, no that. And it was up to him when he decided to plug it back up. He didn't necessarily beat you to death. That wasn't his thing. But if he pulled the plug, you got the bare minimum. Nothing over top. You had one pair of shoes, that's what it was. That's how he treated it. And my mom, who wasn't really there necessarily, she was very spotty, very in and out, very in and out. She was in a situation in which she was trying to protect us from her wrongdoing. She never wanted us to see what she was doing. And when you're young, you just want your mom to be present. That umbilical cord that you there inside of the womb prior to a child being born, that umbilical cord is extremely important. And it's what connects that love, mom and child. And so not having my mom present, it was tough. It was very tough because I didn't understand how to love. When I was a kid, the worst thing for me was watching the news in the morning. I could not watch the news because I was so afraid of the news coming on and it said Minerva Martin was found dead on Cedar or Huff or whatever the case may be. And I couldn't watch certain TV shows because if a lady was raped or if a lady was beaten, because I'm not with my mother. Now I got this visual in a negative light, right? I'm saying to myself. And so that was one of my biggest things. But my mom missing birthdays, my mom was never there for my graduation. She was never there for my mini league games. And I played every sport: football, baseball, basketball, gymnastics. I think it was my kindergarten graduation that my mom was actually at. No senior nights, no nothing. When we used to play mini games, a lot of times parents, they are involved. And so for me, I was always riding with someone else's mom or always riding with someone else's dad or whatnot, because my dad had to work all the time. It was just one of them things where it caused me to develop this mentality. It caused me to really become cold in a way. The fortunate side of that, that really helped me survive as we get into the other questions. That really helped me survive in certain areas in my life. But it was really tough. And in school, when people would at parent teacher conference and things like that, my mom, I never remember her ever making a parent teacher conference. And I used to have to deal with friends telling me, yo, I just saw your mom over here. And I may not have seen her in 6 months. And so for me, I just wanted to get a glimpse of her just to make sure that she was okay. Right. And so it started to develop into that more so in my 11 and 12 and 13 and so on and so forth. And so when I started really doing my thing, 12 and 13, I just wanted to be around, give my mom some money, make sure she was all right. And I never really had anger, if that makes sense. I wasn't really angry. I was more so trying to think of why, right? And then my dad had a conversation with me, my brother and sister, that was very vital to us. And he said, look, your mom has a sickness. That don't mean you disrespect her. That don't mean you be angry. She just has a sickness. And That don't mean she don't love you and things like that. And when my mom would come around, as you guys read in the book, when she would come around, and I call it like to charge her battery, I know she would get a Snickers, she would get a Pepsi, she would be on that couch and she would be charging her battery. But once that battery gets charged, she got the music on, she cleaning. I can smell the pepper steak and rice from down the hall when I would get out the elevator in this apartment building that we lived in for all of like 8 months. But I would also get home from school sometimes and the door was kicked off the hinges because she didn't have a key. And we didn't know when she was going to get there. So she was trying to just get in. And it was a tough thing. That was really tough for me. And that was really tough. But I'm glad my dad explained it the way he did. And I'm glad that I was able to position myself in a way in which I didn't allow that to give me an excuse going forward. I didn't have this I don't give a fuck type of mentality because my mom and dad also were great people. They were high character people. They were the life of the party. My mom was a caregiver. And when she was sober and able to be present, she was the nicest person in the world. So having an example of that, I just took the good. I left the bad. I just tried to focus on the good.
You open this up saying that, you know, your family dynamic is very different from a lot of people. But what I found connecting with our members was that people could relate to it so much, even if it was for different reasons. And even myself in a different situation, I came up with a single mom. And so she was working all the time. And I laugh because I played every sport, was in the musical, even if I wasn't junior beta, I wasn't good at that. Whatever it was, I would be in it because I was seeking that attention or maybe hoping like one of these things they're going to show up. And it even took me a very long time to realize, well, if your mom wasn't working like this, you wouldn't even have a roof over your head, the same way that your father kind of said, like, hey, you know, giving you that justification so you can internalize it better,
Yeah.
especially in your growth. I do want you to know that you're not alone in that. And I saw that you brought out so much good therapy with this book and a lot of our members. And Marla asked you from Goodreads, how did you open your heart up for love and learn how to express love as an adult when you got out of survival mode? How did that play a part in your growth?
Marla, it was a consistent evolution of it, right? Because between that and then the streets also takes away your vulnerability. You can't be vulnerable in the streets. So if you're not vulnerable, how can you love? In order for you to love someone or something, you have to open your heart up to being vulnerable. So now I got two negatives, right? Because I've already got this mentality of, this experience of not having that woman's touch and love and I got a fever or a headache. My mom wasn't in the bed, right, where I can go and wake her up to make me some soup or something like that. I just had to kind of get through it. My sister, but it's the difference between your sister and your mom. Even though my sister became like my mom. And then my time I had spent in the streets, now I really have to, because I'm this little guy and I'm amongst these, gorillas in the jungle, I couldn't ever show vulnerability from that perspective. So now I'm digging a deeper hole. So I had to come out of that hole first. And then I think I have my daughter. My daughter's 21. She graduates this year from college. And that was the first step, right? And then my mom, when I had my first child, my mom came back to Cleveland and she lived with me and she was getting herself clean. And my daughter really caused her to come back. And one of the first times I seen my mom in a long time was when my dad passed away in the year 2000. And I remember her coming back. And it was so crazy that she didn't ride in the limo with us and my grandmother to the cemetery, to the funeral, but she drove my car. So just that visual by itself, seeing my family in my car while I'm in it, it just did something to me, right? And so when I did have a chance to get my mom around when she came up, I just told her to stay. I bought my first house when I was 19 years old. And so when I had my daughter, I just told her to stay. So she came up and I know the type of person she is and the caretaker that she was. And so she helped my daughter and her mom out. And then that led to her going to her meetings and things like that. So she ended up from 21 to 36. I had the best years, the best experience with my mom. And so that allowed me also to develop this vulnerability and love. I always had the love inside. I just had a weird way of showing it. But my dad also did too. Like my parents never really showed me they loved me. One, because my mother wasn't there. And then two, because my dad, he never really said, I love you, son. He showed you by grooming you, by educating you, by helping you understand where the landmines of life was and not to step on those landmines and having your back and things and stress and education, those things like that. So I learned it from a different way, but over the years, I got better and better and better at it. And today with my children, I tell them I love them. I don't expect my son to have to be this macho type of guy. I don't make him play a sport. I allow them to be who they are, right? And it's also because of my experiences as well, and just understanding how important it is and where the world is today. And it's two different playing styles, so to speak, right? I always go back to sports. And so it's been an evolution, though. It hasn't been like this one year, like this. It's not a turn the light switch on. And honestly, I'm still learning how to love. Even in my personal life, being in personal relationships over time, I learned how to love in different intervals. A girl had asked me a question about my brother one time, like, so what does your brother do this now? I'm like, why are you asking me all these questions? And they was like, well, if I don't know you, if I don't ask you questions, how am I to get to know you? And they were right. But growing up, how we grew up, can't ask us questions because we don't ask questions. So if you don't ask questions, you don't want somebody asking you a question, how are you going to date somebody? How are you going to get to know somebody? This is a problem that a lot of us young Black men, at least me growing up, this is a big problem that we had, that communication. And, it set us back. We were taught wrong. And I talk to my young guys about this all the time. We were taught that more was more. We really set our women back too, especially in the things that I was doing in the streets, because the streets allow you to want things to be convenient. And so you just want things to be there, including a young lady that you may be dating. But instead of buying new Jordans every time they came out and excess hairdos and all these things, I'm saying to myself, and I kind of said it back then, but it was just part of the environment. It's like, no, the investment should go the other way. And the last thing you should want to do is get a young lady pregnant, because not only are you stunting your growth, you're also stunting her growth. But it's this thing of, that's mine and it's my possession. And it's really not. But it's hard because they had to lean on you, you getting the excess money, and it's all these things. If you really, and this, we don't have enough hours in a day for this conversation, but when you really, really, really break it down, it really stunted the growth of an entire community and race, right? And so I think about those things all the time. And I was actually going to go a little bit into that in the book, and I just didn't, it just wasn't making sense for me to do it. But that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, I'm still maturing today. But the difference is I'm embracing that, right? I'm not so solidified or so positioned that I think I'm a perfect build. No, I'm under construction every day. I'm working on myself every day, trying to become a better person, a better father, a better partner, a better CEO and executive, a better friend. Just a thoughtfulness is something that could be thoroughly invested in. And so I try to do that.
I see a lot of action in the chat about how important this conversation is for young Black men. And just piggybacking off what you're saying, I think when we read about the close call you had at Winks, that being a pivotal moment in your life, you realized that God had a plan for you and you decided to
Oh,
make a
yeah.
change. A lot of people have those moments time and time again. And they say, ooh, that was a close one. I got to stop what I'm doing. And they don't stop. How do you commit to making a change for the rest of your life, for the betterment of your life?
Well, for me, that was about my third close one. I always understood that this wasn't something that I wanted to do. It was something that I felt like I had to do. And then you just become a product of your environment. And when you're good and when you're really good at something, you start to really buy into that. And that could be a negative or a positive. But when it's a negative and it comes with the consequences that this came with, it's like playing that video game, but you don't realize that the game over actually means the game over. When you play a video game over means you get to either start the game over or you can quit and play later. But you can't do that in life. And so I had the wherewithal and the want. I was just tired. My dad would have, number one, been extremely disappointed, and I knew that. And I had so much respect for my dad, but I also had this mentality that I had to do what I had to do. And I also know that there was a time where he had to do what he had to do. And so I took those things into consideration, but not for granted, if that makes sense. And so that time at Winks, it was just one of those things where, it was just like more so God. I knew God had a different plan for me. And the reason why I knew that is because I've seen these examples. I've seen this time and time and time again. And I'm telling you, 99.5% of the time, it go the other way. It went the other way. It just did. It went the other way. And so for whatever reason, it didn't go that other way for me, really opened my eyes. And also, when you have children, these decisions that you make are for them. And it's selfish of you if you make a decision because you made a decision to have a child, first of all. And then when you make decisions to put that child or those children a position of detriment, that's even more selfish of you because they didn't ask to be here. And now you're making it about you. That's why, when things happen in families and things, and you see these things and the guy, killed his whole family and then killed himself. Just kill yourself. What you got to kill the family? You know what I'm saying? It's like, and it's the same thing in this space. And so I started thinking about those things. And I also started thinking about all the people that took the time out of their day to try to help me. I watched my dad sell beer, wine, and cigarettes and single cigarettes. And that's how I learned math. And that's how I learned marketing and people working in my dad's store and the sacrifice that he made to put me through Catholic school because we didn't get a scholarship. I played basketball. I wasn't that great. They only gave like 2 scholarships a year. And so my dad had to rob Peter and pay Paul. And the weird thing about that, Amber, is to the group, it was such a juxtaposition, right? Because I'm watching my dad rob Peter to pay Paul to pay for my tuition while having the money to pay for my tuition. But I couldn't tell him, and I knew my dad wasn't stupid. I was a gambler, I was this, I was that, so he didn't. But I also never understood why he never made me pitch in, if that makes sense, right? Because I see so many times where a kid is still a kid and the mom or the dad is making them pay half the rent and so on and so forth. Or the first thing we do is kick a child out. We thought at 18, you got to get out my house, get out my house, get out my house. And that's actually wrong. When you watch The Godfather, which is one of my favorite movies, you don't realize that the whole family stays on that compound. That entire family stays on that compound. They don't move out until they're actually positioned to actually move out and positioned in a way that it doesn't set them back at any, still work a job, save your money, do what you need to do, but it's not like you got to hurry up and go. In our community, especially for us as Black people, we treat our children, our family as just hurry up and go. But that shouldn't be the mentality. You get what I'm saying? So now when they hurry up and go and they get out there and they make a mistake, a young lady get pregnant too soon or a young man, do whatever. That's the issue. That's the beginning point of us consistently being the minority, right? And so how do we break that? I told these stories because I'm really trying to change that. And I told my kids, listen, leave when you feel comfortable, I'm building a whole nother, daughter got a whole nother property on our property because of that, right? Because I know she may not want to be there, but at the same time, here's your own space. That way you got your space and you're present, right? Because I know if she don't have that, she may never want to be there, but I want her to be there. So it's these type of things that the book, I wanted to express these things. And this book, although it's me on the cover, this is a us story. This story is about us. It's not about me per se. I wanted this to be the real give back, right? Share these experiences to give people understanding and hope and motivation. And it's never too late. Most people don't make their money till they're 55 years old, right? Jimmy Iovine created beats at 53. And so I have several examples of that. But until we start to build a community, it'll be very hard for us to compound and really position ourselves to do things, right? Because it's been something that's been placed upon us for many years, and we've been miseducated for many years about what success really is, about what's really important, about who and what to actually value. And so we have yet to break that cycle, right? And I use Jordans as a great example of that, right? We aspired to wear Jordans, and then when little kids had kids, when kids started having kids, the first thing they did was buy their kids Jordans, and then it become that thing. Not the person himself, because I love Michael Jordan. I'm talking about the idea of this is a value. It's not like a Basquiat or a Warhol where it's appreciating. Think about an entire race across America put their value into this product that it set the tone mentally for us as a whole. And that became the thing. At the park, baby with Jordans on was a sign of success. When I'm in these meetings, I express this, and When I'm in Nike meetings, I express that. Don't get it twisted. It wasn't just basketball that built all of this. It was crack and Black people and our excessive mentality that built this. But I don't see any Black designers in here. I don't see a pathway, or I don't see a program that helps people understand how to become a creative or how to become a shoe designer. Where's that reciprocity for our support, our excessive support of this brand or whatnot? And I'm not just picking on Nike because I have partnerships in all type of areas. It was just the one thing that was leading. And so when I started my partnership with New Balance and Clutch, the one thing that my whole purpose really for doing it, and not only purpose, but a big want for me is to change that. I want to build a brand that when people go and buy something, they can also say, you know what, my nephew worked here, my niece works here, my daughter got an opportunity to work here. I built Clutch that way as well. I built Clutch Sports Group that way as well, and so it's just that type of stuff is extremely important to me, but I don't want to get off the question. So
No, you listen, you answer about 5 of the questions every time you talk. So I said, okay, cool. I can skip that. I can skip that. I mean, I'm just going to go off the cuff here. Like, I'm very grateful for my network and, the people that are in Amber's book club that are viewing this right now. We are young executives. We work at these corporate companies. We have the opportunity to be change makers. I'm so proud of everybody in my network for having a seat at the table, but I'm listening to what you're saying, and how can they go in those rooms and actually make the changes that they want to see? The conversation that you're having with Jordan, because you have the access to be in the room, we don't all show up like that. Sometimes we're like, well, I don't want to lose my job, so I'm not about to tell them we need to start a program for the kids. How can we be better in that way?
that's the thing, right? And I think, again, we've only had to focus on our thing was having a job first, and then having a good job. This is going back to our grandparents, right? And they just wanted to sit there. So somebody would be a cashier at Walmart for 20 years because they actually had a job. But I think there's an understanding to have that, okay, how do I work the ecosystem of this job? And in order for me to work the ecosystem, I have to have the want to understand what that ecosystem looks like. And then if I can understand what that ecosystem look like, I can now start to navigate my way throughout this ecosystem, right? And so a friend of mine, I was talking to her, and we grew up together. And so I was checking on her, and we was just talking, and she was like, Rich, my son don't want to work at Target. And I said, well, let me speak to him. And, she's done excellent. And I said, me and your mom go way back. That's my girl, your grandmother. And so I said, why don't you want to work at Target? And he said, well, I said, let me tell you something. Don't look at you working at Target as you working at Target. I want you to look at you working at Target as the beginning of you running Target, right? But in order for you to run Target, the best way for you to do that is to understand at ground level what Target is all about. And so if you're playing the long game, this is just the beginning. Let them friends laugh at you at the cashier or while you bagging the groceries or whatever the case may be. But then to cultivate a relationship with your supervisor, take your supervisor out to lunch, help them understand what it is you want to do and how you want to do it, and ask them. Most people in successful positions want us to talk about themselves, right? So ask them, how did you get here? What did you do? What did you do right? What did you do wrong? They're going to end up giving you the cliff notes to the next step. And then you know what they're going to do? They're going to go to their manager and say, you know what? We need to make such and such the next this. And then you just work your way up like that. I had this conversation with my brother the other day. We're conditioned not to take instruction because we come from a hustler's environment. There is no time clock. You on your own time. There is no boss, so-called your own boss, right? But that is not this real thing, right? It's actually whack in a lot of ways, right? But this is what people, they have this mentality. It's okay to want to be your own boss. I'm not saying that, but understand that in order to be my own boss, I have to understand and go through this education of different bosses to know what type of boss I should want to be, right? Because there's several different types. And as you go through your experience of working different jobs, it starts to mold you. So when you become a boss, you take the good and the bad from different ones, right? That's how I learned. I did it in a different way. I did it from the streets. I watched my brother, I watched my uncle, I watched this, I watched that. And I took the good and the bad from all of them. So when I got there, I did things differently, saved my life, right? It's the same way now. All the agents that came before me, I studied all of them without them ever knowing I studied them. I studied all of them. So when I got my opportunity, when I left CAA, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I knew exactly what was missing. I knew exactly what they could do, what they were great at, and I knew exactly what they wasn't great at. So when I came at an inflection point of disruption, and they had no understanding like, oh, well, he's just going to start this and it ain't going to work and blah, blah, blah. But they didn't know what my conversation was going to be like and what my position was going to be like. And they also didn't know that I also studied the athlete and had an understanding of exactly what they were looking for and exactly how their brain was starting to function in this space. And I hit right on that. And I was able to build a business at a time where the Black athlete was searching for something that wasn't there. And I became that. Now, today, it's a cool thing to be an agent, right? Before, nobody really knew what an agent actually did. That person wasn't out in front, so on and so forth. And so my sole goal was to disrupt an industry. It wasn't necessarily to make. I was getting 20% of LeBron's business since I was 24 years old. It wasn't the money thing. It was more so about creating a disruption in an industry to be able to change the way our young men were being represented, right? We already had a company. We already had LRM where we focused on LeBron's off the court business. I understood what that was like, but I didn't want to make it solely about him. And then the second part of it was me positioning myself to where I was thankful, but not necessarily dependent of, because I didn't know when LeBron was going to stop playing the game. When his game stopped, that don't mean I have to stop doing what I'm doing, right? And I also knew that you're not going to really know how somebody really feels about you or plan to treat you until they no longer have to pick up your phone call because of something. So I never wanted to be in that position. I wanted to create something to where my phone call will always have to be picked up. And you got to hope that I pick your phone call up because I'm just positioned that way. And so that was my mentality and my focus. And so when you have these aspirations and you start to have a better understanding of your ecosystem, and I'm going to tell you something, it's the same thing in your personal life. I talk to my friends that are women and my friends that are men all the time. And I tell them, you have to change your ecosystem. And the ecosystem doesn't always have to come on the back of finance. It should lead from a character perspective, right? When I'm evaluating talent, if I'm talking to an owner of a team and he's saying, well, Rich, what would you do in this case? I said, well, I'm not going to sit here for 18 months. I'm going to give this starting guard 18 months to see how their character is, see how their professionalism is, see how they are willing to change and willing to embrace, see how their leadership qualities is. And I may want to get off of that in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. I tell my daughter the same thing. If you're dating a guy, you're not sitting there for a year to hope he changes. He ain't changing a year. It ain't changing. So don't even get to no fucking year. What you get into a year for? You have an example. You have a great example. You have several examples of what it looked like. You know it when you see it. Because how I think about it, and I tell her, listen, you have rich soil. If you're going to allow somebody to plant a seed in that soil, you got to make sure that that seed has the ability to blossom in a way that your family benefits from that, right? And I tell my guys on the other side, hey, you got to make sure that soil is in sanitation. It's a difference between the two. And don't get caught up in the appearance of things. You got to go a little bit deeper than that, right? And it's harder when you have the money because you think that money solves all problems, but it does not. Money is just a masking. It's a cortisone shot of life. Don't solve no problems. We know that, right? Money is convenience, which is great, right? And so that's my mentality to my guys. And that's what I know. My industry, they don't have an ounce of that. They're leading with a business card. And some of you may work at these different competitors, but in sports, I know these guys, they don't wear that on their sleeve. They don't have the life experiences. They're not forward thinking. They are professional ego strokers. And that's part of the job. So am I for a 1% of my 100% makeup. That's just part of it, right? That you have to instill that confidence and so on and so forth. But the ego stroke sometimes goes over that meter and it starts to run hot. And that's when you're only stroking the ego. Like when we work with talent, we all gotta have that ability to stroke an ego, but you can't lead with that. That's how I was able to build a business.
All right, we getting entrepreneurial advice, relationship advice, career advice. I wasn't ready. I'm off script. I do have to ask this because you said something very important. What you built for yourself. And a lot of our young music managers that are in here, just anybody in these positions, sometimes we only think we're as good as our job position, or we'll only be as good as our biggest client. And we're not thinking about ourselves when we move past them, or they don't want to rap anymore. You're not going to be a manager anymore. Like, how do you build for yourself? I'll just say it, like, you're a star in your own right. You are a star executive. And I think sometimes a lot of us hide from that, or we think people look at us differently because of that, but that makes you who you are. And I don't have anybody else to ask this question to, because you are one of the only people doing that. So I need you to give us that
Yeah,
confidence.
I know exactly what you're saying, and it was tough for me. That's why I didn't have an Instagram for a while. I really struggled with being on the cover of Sports Illustrated because we deal with egos and we deal with talent, right? But here's what I said to myself: talent gonna come and go. That's just part of it. It's the evolution, right? But talent has to respect what you do. Talent has to value what you do, and talent has to understand that you're going to do with or without them. And when you position yourself as such, now it comes with a different approach. And we play ourselves in the talent representation industry by trying to fit in with the talent versus fitting out, right?
Mhm.
So for me, when I first started building a business, they used to ask me all the time, Rich, you going on a boat trip? Nope. Jamil could tell you, like, you rarely saw me with LeBron because I'm working, I'm hustling. I don't have time to be in Bordeaux or the south of France. It's free agency. I'm in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, recruiting. I'm doing this. And so prior to me actually being his actual agent, I missed out on the Miami lunches, on the, in the marina. I missed out on all the trips and different things like for several years, right? And most people view you as others view you. So when I started to gain that respect of the Jay-Z's and the Jimmy Iovine's and the Steve Stouts and the Adam Silvers, not me standing next to LeBron, Rich Paul himself, on the back of building this and doing this and doing that, I understood exactly how LeBron would feel, right? And I also did never wanted him to feel like he had to be obligated to do something for me. I positioned myself as such where he wanted and felt comfortable. And you know what's even more important? Would look actually silly not aligning himself with me because I've done the work. So when you've done the work, it actually is a glaring hole. If people be like, well, imagine that. Imagine if Brown was like, you would be like, well, damn, how is it that, and you over here, and he over, that looks like now they start looking at him crazy, like, yo, what's up with that? He would never do that, but I'm just saying this was my mentality, was like, hey, this is my positioning. I met Jamil through my relationship with Drake. I met Drake through my relationship with G. Roberson. And one night I was working on the More in the Game soundtrack with Polo Nadon. Because I don't know for all you music execs on here, I'm really a music guy at heart. And I was working on the More in the Game soundtrack with Polo and at the same time doing some other stuff. And it was Grammy weekend. Jay had called me over to the Beverly Wilshire, and it was this long table of people, and it was like G. Roberson and Jay and Kanye, and it was all type of people. And when I got down to it, it was this young kid sitting across from me because I was the last one. I was late, and but I was supposed to be. I was late, but I was meeting him there to hang out that night. I'm sitting across from this young man, and this young man just so happened to be Drake. So G tells me this, blah blah blah, and we meet and we talk, whatever. And me getting this from my mother, I said to him, I said, well, I'm coming to Toronto in a couple of weeks. You doing your music thing. I'm going to do something for LeBron. I'm going to put you on the flyer because it's your hometown. We're going to show you that love. G said, you family, you family. I don't know from a can of paint. I'm just, G said, it's family, it's family. So anyway, I do this. And this event ended up being the album release party for So Far Gone. I did not know this at the time, and so on and so forth. And then later on, we started having a conversation about just the album and so on and so forth. And it wasn't even that long after that. But anyway, we were having a conversation about the records. And he had this idea of Uptown. And I was telling him that best I ever had was the record. And we were going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And so that night in the club, I had the DJ play this record over and over and over again. That's what happened. We met at the Hyatt and we were just kind of hanging out. during the day before that party that night. And I said to him that that was the record. And he was like, nah, this Wayne record, blah, blah. I'm like, I know you want to do the Wayne record, but I'm just telling you, this is the record. And so I had the DJ play this record, and he ended up picking that record for the single. He really did. And but I made that point because I wanted to help you understand. If I, in that moment, just go with what he's saying because he's who he is, but I really knew and felt in my heart that this was the right decision. And so if you ask Drake, I mean, he actually said it on Elliott Wilson. He said, Rich picked the single. Rich picked Best I Ever Had, which I did. And I didn't, but at the time, I didn't know I was picking the single. I was just giving him the honest to God truth of what, because he asked me my thoughts. And that's always been my thing, no matter who it was. It's always been my thing to just give them the truth. You know, I'm sitting in those Nike meetings, I'm telling them, listen, man, this shoe ain't it. I don't care what y'all say. This shoe is not it. And what you got to realize is when you're dealing with athletes, when these companies come and say, well, what you think about this shoe? They're already 9 months into production anyway, right? And I say to them, why would you ask him, what does he think about the shoe? Well, it's his shoe. Yeah, but is it really his shoe, right? You got to understand something. If a mother has a child and the doctor says, well, what do you think? How does she look or how does he look? The mom will be like, she's beautiful. He's beautiful, right? It's the same way with an athlete and their shoe, okay? Now, that baby could be sitting there looking like God knows what, but it sat in the womb for 9 months. Of course, it's beautiful. It's the same way with this product. It got my name on it. Now, here's the trick. Not really, because now you're asking someone who's never had to make a decision on what was cool and what was not cool ever in their life. Because by the time they were actually able to get it for themselves, they did what? They were given it. So I was always given the best things, right? As an athlete, I'm not saying me. They were always given the hottest shit. When you're always given the hottest stuff, you can't develop this understanding and this know-how of understanding what's cool and how to connect things. How you gain that is like we all had to do as regular people, go into the store, look on the shelf, that's sold out, that's not there, we don't have your size in that. So, okay, give me that. And I have to make that cool. They never had to do that. So now here come these people at this cubicle that drew up something and put a name on it to the athlete that ain't never had to make a decision. And this is how you get bad product. Now, most agents, they can't sit in the room and understand that. They don't know that. They never bought more than 2 pairs of sneakers in their life, right? So again, when you talk about sitting in these rooms, and I know I'm kind of going all over the place, but I just had to make this, I wanted to give you this example of just how these decisions are made and why I've been able to separate myself from the rest of the pack with all of these types of guys. Like I've never bit my tongue with none of them. And I've always had an ability to give them what I felt was of value to them. So when you're in these positions as an executive, that's how, right? And it's reading the room, it's having tones, having understanding, and having the know-how and really being educated on. And it's a way to do it. It's like, hey, let's go to lunch. Sometimes it's okay to make it their idea. Make it their idea. You know how many times I've been behind the scenes and made something someone else's idea, didn't get the credit for it? Fine by me, because I know who I am, so it's fine. But with that being said, for many years, I was playing that role. I was just waiting on my turn to perform. When I found a lane and they gave me my stage, I had all the confidence in the world that I was going to build and be something. Now, I'll be lying to you if I said I thought I would be in a position I am today. And they knew it. My peers knew it. Sometimes your peers know who got it, who don't. They know. And you just have to surround yourself with people that understands that you have it and have a willing and a want to give you that mic at some time versus preventing you from ever being allowed to touch the mic. And that's what most people deal with around talent, especially in sports.
Well, first of all, I'm only going to address you as Rich Paul, the A&R now. So that's that's your
You'd be
new name.
surprised. No, but I listen.
Nah, please.
I love music. I
Don't
got
be
two big records on my phone right now, huge records.
Rich Paul, the A&R. You dropping gems on us. Like I said, you done answered about 20 of my questions.
I got time.
This was the first book, and I read a lot of books, nonfiction only, by the way. I have never cried reading a book. I was so embarrassed. I was listening to your audiobook, read that epilogue, and I was messed my whole makeup up. So thank you for that. I've laughed in a lot of books. I've felt many things, but I've never cried. And so I wanted to tell you, it's not a question. All of my members, we fell in love with Peaches. And I just wanted to tell you that we love her so much because how much you love her. You protected
Yeah,
her in your book. You stood up for her in your book. You gave her credit for doing the best that she could with what she had. And I know Dom in here, a lot of our members, we said, girl, we need to talk about Peaches, girl.
yeah.
we
Y'all would love
love,
Peaches.
we
Y'all would
love
love Peaches.
Peaches. And I
Y'all
just
would
wanted
love
to tell you
Peaches.
that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And it's like that was tough. The epilogue, just writing about my mother, just in general. I don't know if you guys know, but my mom was found unresponsive, and it was just one of those things. And it was a weird dynamic for about half a second when I got that call. Part of me was in this mindset of she don't have to suffer no more, because you never know the demons within that someone is fighting. My mom could never get the time back that she lost with her children and with our childhood, right? And out there scratching and clawing, trying to survive while also trying to prevent us from seeing her in this state, right? But my mom was just this person of class and taste. My mom, she wouldn't even go to the grocery store without her hair being done and pantyhose. My mom, when any picture you see of her, she putting it on. And I think that's where I get a lot of my fashion stuff from, and my love for that, and seafood and all the other things. But when she was in her element, she was the best, and she was someone who all the women and men on this carpet, my clients and my friends, when they would come, they would go right to my mother's house. All the kids at my mother's house, and she was just that infectious person. And I come to understand that there's so many people across the country whose mom was the same way, but they looked at them different because they didn't understand the sickness, right? And they scolded and totally separated themselves because their mom may have took something from them or took some money or did this or did that. And the reality of it is, all that shit don't matter, because you can get all that back, but you only get one mom. And once she's gone, you can't get that back. And so I was determined, and I was extremely proud of myself and my family for those 15 years that we did have with her. I used to take my mom to Vegas for every summer league. She would bring the kids out for a week, and I tried to give her everything that she missed out on, house and car and this and that. And so I was glad and not about the material things, but just to see her smile and see her be confident and see her as a woman, especially as a Black woman. And my mom would come to those games down at the Q, and she never needed a ticket. It's the craziest thing ever, because all the ushers and things were people in their AA meetings and stuff like that, and they knew Peaches, and Peaches had that infectious touch on everybody. So it's no surprise to me that you ladies, fell in love with the character of Peaches, because she was something to really fall in love with. And so when she did pass away, I was at peace though. I really was. I was at peace with the understanding that, one, I know my mom always wanted to be with my dad, and her mom had passed away. And those were two of the most important people in her life. And I know when those two things happened, and they happened, 10 years apart, but she was just like devastated. It was tough on me and tough on us as a family, but at the same time, I found peace. There's a balance, right? I miss my mom every day, but I understand it. So, but no, I appreciate that. That's pretty cool.
Society can accept that poor Black environments instill a hunger, drive, and savvy that produces great athletes. It's long overdue for society to accept that we can produce just as many great executives too. This is the quote that personally spoke to me and to a lot of my friends and all of us who came into music, maybe because we thought it was the easiest route to take or we didn't have all the qualifications. I too am a college dropout. And when I read that, I felt like a product of your legacy. And I want to thank you for that, for showing us just how far we can take it with the qualifications that we do have. Like you said, we got a head start, and I never looked at it like that. And I appreciate that. And so my last question for you is, what impact do you envision your legacy having, 10 years from now, 20 years from now?
Hopefully, I think it'll have the impact of really valuing the person and not the credentials. I think, as we know, these credentials are, in a lot of ways, they manufacture, right? Because it takes you through a process that the so-called establishment say we have to go through, right? But when you work in a service industry, when you work in a creative industry, that's within, right? And I know a lot of you on this call, you guys are better than your bosses. We know that, right? We make them look good. We know that, right? And so for me, I think it's important for us to not just value a title, but to value the ability to have decision making power despite the title or even within the title. And then with that decision making power, it's on us to make decisions that further position those that not only look like you, but look like you and are capable of doing the work. Because oftentimes we get caught up in just a skin tone, but we have to get caught up in understanding that that skin tone has to come with capabilities. And so it's important for you to know that and to carry on that tradition, because if we pay it forward, then it's on you to pay it forward. If you see something in somebody, pull it out of them and position them where they can also do the same for someone else, you know. And I think that ultimately, as you guys work throughout this ecosystem, it's important for people to value your expertise and your knowledge, but it's also important for you to present it in a way that is not embarrassing to or showing up that person, right? It's also important for you to understand that we're all replaceable, right? I think the one thing people don't understand is that you have to create so much value to that where you become irreplaceable. I know the value that I brought to UTA just by being associated with them. Forget working and forget being on the board, forget being the co-head of sports. I know the value that I brought just by the company being able to say they have an association with Rich Paul, right? And Clutch Sports Group. I know that. Now, when we become partners, that's an even different value, right? And so I understand that. And I didn't have to do that, but I sacrificed me standing alone and doing my thing or whatever for the ability to grow the pie and to position others. You know, if I got this personal pan pizza, which is great, and it's got all the works, but at the same time, I'm the only one, not the only one, but it's very small amount of us that's actually winning. But in order for us to grow, I got to be able to grow the pie. And so that was my reasoning for partnering with UTA the way I did. I could have picked anybody, but I picked them for a different reason. A lot of it had to do with growth opportunity, right? And so one of my things is, you know, making sure that people are positioned properly as well. And we're now at the point to where we're getting these opportunities to be able to have decision making power, and we got to value it. We're no longer at the point to where we're just okay with having a job or a good job or a great job. You know, now we have to get to the point to where we not only do we have a great job, but we have a great job that's coming with decision making power, that's coming with partner next to your name, that's coming with equity and all these type of things that we never knew about, that was not hidden from us, but just wasn't attainable for us for so many years, nor did we care about it. You know, the reason why you don't see a lot more young Black Americans playing soccer or football, but soccer, is because we never seen an example of the soccer player that had fortune and fame. Imagine if we did. The Premier League would be full of motherfuckers from St. Louis and, you know, Atlanta and Cleveland, Chicago. You know, but it really would. We saw what we saw. But think about that. And it's also the reason why that sport in itself is not lucrative in our schools, because there's no pathway to fortune and fame. This is how we were taught. Our minds were taught this way. The reason why I chose to be on the cover of Sports Illustrated, because I didn't really want to be on there for a number of reasons. A lot of it had to do with representing talent. But then I thought about it, I'm saying, but no, this is a better example. This is an opportunity for me to be a great example to others, right? And so on one end, I can't talk about, oh, we only want to be rappers or ball players, when I had the opportunity to be on the cover of and be a great example. And that's what it was really about for me, giving kids another example of what they could be despite or instead of being a ball player, etc.
Thank you. Well, if you have never heard from the kids that you inspire, we very much appreciate you choosing not to dim your light because regardless of how your peers may look at it, whatever you being a superstar executive looks like, the people that you want to see it, that you're doing it for, we are so impressed and we are so thankful. Just
And
thank you.
and I think it's important for you guys to know, like, the one thing that allowed us to be successful is because we understood who should be leading at this time. Oftentimes, be the person out front for the sake of being a person out front. That may not be what's best for the team. Sometimes it's okay for you to know that I'm really probably the most talented here, but this person is probably better to lead right now. If you guys watch Griselda on Netflix, I just watched it last night, some of it, but I took something out of it and it ties into this, what I'm about to tell you. Sometimes, for the sake of Griselda, sometimes the plug is intimidated by your talents. And sometimes it's important to let that person lead that they're not intimidated by for you to get to where you're trying to go. And I've been through that. I know the intimidation that I bring just with my presence to people, just with my presence. And I also know how important it is to have someone else lead sometimes to get to where we're trying to go. I did this for many years, by the way. I did. And it's okay. As you guys are working together and having these different chats and you guys are in the industry or whatnot, identify who does what well, share, communicate ideas, really believe in those ideas, put an infrastructure or structure together with those ideas, and then go out to those who can help, right? And I think that understanding that you have the power, as long as you have the talent or the ability to pull the talent, that's the power. None of these places exist without the talent. And the one thing we have to get the talent to understand is they can work alongside of us without have to worry about counting our pockets or what we getting, right? Or they can work alongside of us, or they should want to work alongside of us and want to pay us for our work, right? Instead of the more successful somebody becomes, especially in the music industry and in sports, the more they want to cut their fees to you, etc. But then they go to whether it's the Irving Azoffs or whether it's the Scooter Browns or whether it's in my business, the CAAs or WMEs or etc. And they feel great about paying them more, which is something that exists across the board, right? And so the biggest thing we have to work on is the mindset of the talent to help them understand. In order to have an ecosystem that has reciprocity within, we have to value each other. And you want that because guess what? We're building something. You're a rapper. You should want to pay me top dollar because I'm doing the work, helping you drive more revenue. If I build something with your support and you fall off, but then you have a daughter graduating from Spelman, I have the ability to provide an opportunity for her based upon this is what they do, right? This is what they do. I don't care what nobody says. If I see it every day. This person had this agency and competed against this person. Now they out the business running this team, and this person's son works for the same competitor that they once competed against. We don't do that. One, we don't have anything to stand on, right? We didn't build anything. And two, we don't have the full support. I know a few big name guys and he don't charge them anything. So you think, yeah, he may not charge you anything, but his association with your IP makes him a ton of money. You get what I'm saying? But because in your mind you feel like he's not charging you nothing, but yet it's still he's able to go out and tell other people or other companies that hey, I represent this person. Well, that's it. I don't know about the charge, but I definitely know about the value. You get what I'm saying? And that's a game they've been running for so long. And unfortunately, a lot of our talent, high level talent, has turned a blind eye to it, right? It's a lot of things that need to be fixed, right? Um, and I don't know if we can tear the house down and just build it over from scratch, but that's what may have to be done. But just know, pay attention to what's really working in the industry, and don't be afraid to take that leap, because but don't take the leap prematurely. When I took my leap, I had an understanding of what I wanted to do, how I wanted to do it. I didn't know who I was going to do it with, but I knew that over time, long as I stayed consistent, that I would be able to build it.
We don't get a lot of executives that can talk to us but have been through what we've been through. Sometimes it feels like people talking at you, and that's why this book is beautiful. But then to just hear how intellectual you are, and you just dropped all these gems on us, everybody's saying they want to listen to this every morning when they wake up. um Seriously, like, we are in here. You've been on CNN, you've been doing so much, and you came and sat here with a book club by a Black woman, and this will make you the realest person ever, besides that song you A&R for Drake and all the other incredible things that you do. So thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you,
Thank you
guys.
guys. I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
I love you guys.